Just let me know if you can see the PowerPoint slides. Can you?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we have to start today with another unit, and we begin with unit 4. And so we finished time domain analysis last time. Now we will start with the frequency domain analysis. And here we'll be looking at certain methods. We'll be looking at for analysis of systems, of control systems. There are certain things that are very important for us to know about a system. When once it's working, one of the things that is very important for us to know is stability of a system. Stability is an important factor that we need to know when we analyze a control system. There is something called as controllability. Controllability is another thing. How well we can control a system. That is also very important. Sometimes a system may work, but we would want to change certain parameters so that we can, tweak the output in a way that we desire it to be after a certain point of time. Like I give you a very small example. Suppose you have a production plant that gives you 1,000 thumbs up bottles in a day, and it works really fine. There is hardly any day that you do not get it. But then you want to upscale the production to say 1,500 bottles. What do? Can you kind of tweak the parameters of the system so that it could be controlled in such a way that there is an increased amount of production? Or if you want to decrease the amount of production, what can you do? So things like that. That's controllability. There is another thing called as observability. And these parameters, these three parameters primarily are very important to us. Stability, of course, is most important to us because we don't want to end up designing a system that is unstable. Stability has actually two kinds of manifestations. The first is we talk about absolute stability. We'll come to what it means, but for now you just know. And then there is a relative stability. So like absolute and relative stability are much like asking ourselves certain questions that we generally do. Let us try to relate it like that. Whether we have passed or failed in an examination is like an absolute answer, in the sense that have you passed? Yes. Have you passed? No. So absolute stability has to deal with whether a system is stable or it is not stable. That's all. Yes or no. Relative stability is like, okay, you have passed, but how well have you done in comparison to others? Are you the topper? Are you probably in the top 5 or top 10? So that's like relative there. How many marks you, if would not have scored, you would have failed? Those kind of questions come into picture when you try to look into the relative sense of assessing yourself and your performance with regards to your peers or whatever is the sample set. Similarly, relative stability has to do with what should we do to reach to a point where you are at the verge of unstable scenario, or how stable are you with respect to some other system which almost gives the same kind of results but has different controlling parameters, things like that. So relative stability comes that, where we talk about degree of stability and comparison between two systems of how one is more stable than the other, or what parameters do we need to tweak to reach to instability. Like for example, something could be working really well, then you may be tempted to know for what changes in parameters it will still be stable, so that you're like stretching the system. It's like saying that I can do 100 push-ups and I'm still okay. Let me just see whether I can do 150, then maybe 200, and then you'll realize, okay, at this point of time, I will feel the wear and tear in my muscles, and I will reach the point of fatigue that I cannot take. So that's more like relative. But absolute is very clear, yes or no. That is what it is. So most of the things, most important aspect is this. This is the most important aspect. Of course, these two are also important, but the first and the most important thing for us is that we have to be sure that the systems that we are establishing are stable, because unless or until they are stable, there is no point looking into observability and controllability. So we look into observability and controllability if the system is working to what we desire it to do. Only then there is a point to look into these things. So the first thing that we are going to look into is whatever tools and methods that we will look in the frequency domain analysis. The first thing that we'll see is that how we can ascertain stability, whether it's absolute or relative, using those methods. Okay, so then there are some methods that we will we'll study methods employed. So the first method that we will employ is something that I think probably you people have already studied in I think network analysis. It's called Routh Hurwitz. Maybe not Routh Hurwitz, but you must have studied about Hurwitz polynomial. Have you studied about Hurwitz polynomial? Can anybody tell me?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Yes or no? I mean, I can't hear you properly.
No, sir. We haven't.
Type. I can't hear you. Is there? Can you type on the chat? I think
no, sir.
No. In network analysis, you've not. Okay. Okay, doesn't matter. Fair enough. Okay. Right. So we'll look into first method is Routh Hurwitz method. We will see into something called as Nyquist plot. This Nyquist is the same gentleman that gave the sampling theorem. So he has a lot of applications in. Yes, he has a lot of contributions in engineering. Third, we look into something called as root locus. And then we'll also look into a technique called as Bode plot. Just a second, yeah. So these are the four methods that we'll look into. One is Routh Hurwitz method, second is Nyquist plot, then root locus technique, and we'll look into what is Bode's plot. So that is how we're going to proceed. Okay, so essentially, just the basic introduction that I've given you, we are looking into frequency domain analysis, which means that we will work in S domain. And these methods that we look into are Routh Hurwitz method, we look into Nyquist plot, we will look into root locus technique, and we look into Bode plot. And The primary goal is, of course, to assess stability, absolute or relative. And once we've ascertained that, then we'll go ahead and we'll probably be designing some systems. And later on, we'll look into other important factors like controllability and observability, which probably would be the last topics that we'll do with this unit. Okay, so let's start with a discussion on stability. So it is perhaps one of the most important aspects in the analysis. So, one can say that, you may have systems of different types. Like, for example, you may have systems which are linear. You can have systems which are non-linear. You can have systems which are time invariant. You can have systems which are time invariant. So you can have these combinations, but and for all these systems, stability is defined, or decided differently. Stability could mean different things to different systems. Stability could be defined differently. For most of the systems. So, if a system is a linear time invariant, we will define stability in a certain way. Linear time variant will define it in a certain way. Non-linear time invariant and non-linear time variant will define them in certain ways. But for our discussion in this course, we are basically interested in the stability of single input single output, something called as SISO, LTI. Systems. So we'll look into the stability of linear time invariant systems, and that to single input and single output. We'll see how we can go to multiple input and multiple output later. And for that, probably we'll need what is called a state space analysis. If you remember, we did a state space model. So we'll look into that a little later. But for now, we're going to look into SISO LTI systems, single input and single output systems. As I mentioned before, stability can be of two types that we look into. One is your absolute stability and the other is your relative stability. Absolute stability is simply in terms of stable system, unstable system. So more like, yes or no. You will just have to answer whether a system is stable. Yes, it is stable. System is stable. No, it is not stable. That is what absolute stability tells you. Relative stability, well, of course, here you talk about degree of stability. That means you say how stable. Those are the kind of questions you're asking here. Then you also ask a question which I don't have a lot of space to write here, but it's like, to what extent the system will be stable if we are tweaking or changing the parameters that define the system or its stability. So it's like that. So we are going to look into methods that give us, these kind of stabilities. Okay. So the next thing that we will look into is the stability of CISO systems. So since we are looking at CISO LTI systems, how will we define their stability? Well, we are going to define this stability as BIBO stability. Which means that for bounded input, there must be a bounded output. That is very important. So this is the kind of stability that we talk about, and we'll focus on this stability for CISO LTI systems. Generally, one can ascertain stability using the poles of a system or characteristic equation of a system. So if suppose you're given, just to tell you what poles are, I think probably you already know. Suppose you have a transfer function which is GS, which is numerator over the denominator. Then poles of the system are basically the roots of equation D equal to 0. These will give you the roots. S values of this equation, the solutions of this equation are going to give you the roots, which are going to be the poles. That is the basic definition of poles. Characteristic equation of a system is simply 1 plus GS HS equals 0. So either one of these methods are going to be used to a certain stability, and we are going to look into what is called as BIBO stability. Okay, I'm not saying right now the method is whether the method will give you absolute stability or relative stability, but I'm telling you that we are going to look into single input, single output LTI systems and talk about their stability and what kind of stability is BIBO stability. There is another kind of stability that we talk about, but that is related to transient and steady state response, which we have studied in the time domain analysis, where we see how soon the transient response will die out and steady state response will be achieved. So that's another stability. But in frequency response analysis, we're going to look into BIBO stability, and it could be a certain either using the poles, or it could be basically it is all about where the poles are. We'll come to that discussion. So either you will be given a transfer function and you'll be asked to tell whether the system is stable or not. The best way to go about it is either looking at the poles where they are, or you may have characteristic equation, and using the characteristic equation, you will be able to tell about the stability and instability of a system. So we'll come to that. But this is basically what we're going to do. Bibo stability, and that can be ascertained knowing the location of the poles, and by doing some mathematics that involves the characteristic equation. Okay, so what exactly do we mean by Bibo stability? Let's do some mathematical analysis of it. So when we say Bibo stability, we know that we have a bounded input and we have a bounded output. Suppose I have a system. Suppose I have a system to which I am providing an input ut. I am getting a response yt, and the system has an impulse response gt. Suppose this is a system that I have. So we know from a time domain analysis that and this input is provided from t equal to 0. So it's a causal input. So this is basically u t minus tau g tau d tau. I can write it like this. This is simply a convolution of gt and ut. In many books, you will see that this is written as 0 to infinity g t minus tau u tau d tau. But you can always interchange t minus tau because the system is LTI. That's possible. So we will just take up this definition and not consider this. So if this is how we define output, then if I take a magnitude of the output, then I take the magnitude on the right hand side as well. So I take the magnitude on the right hand side as well. So this I can write is equal to 0 to infinity u t minus tau g tau d tau, and using an inequality called Schwarz inequality, this is less than equal to 0 to infinity mod of ut minus tau g tau d tau. Now our input is bounded. Input is bounded. That is that our mod of ut is say less than equal to some quantity m, which is of course less than infinity. It's some finite quantity. So the input is bounded, like sine is bounded between -1 and 1. So m is essentially 1. So let's say that the input is bounded, and we also know that our output is bounded. That is what we talk about in terms of bounded input, bounded output, which means that our yt is also bounded to n, which is less than infinity. So if I substitute them in this equation which I've written over here, essentially what I'll get is I'll say that n is less than n is I'll just no, I think I've put the wrong sign. I think just a second. I think yt would be greater than equal to this. Yeah. So the ultimate equation that I'll get is that n is greater than equal to m 0 to infinity g tau d tau, which essentially would mean that for bounded systems and bounded input bounded output system, mod of g tau d tau should be less than equal to some quantity q, which is m by n. So this is the essential condition for Bibo stability. It is that the integration of the mod of the impulse response should be finite and should be within some limits. That's how we define Bibo stability if an impulse response is given. So basically, if suppose you're given a system GT, so if I ask you whether this system is going to be Bibo stable or not, then you don't really need to ask me, sir, what is the input, what is the output. The basic thing is that you need to evaluate this. And if this quantity comes out to be less than infinity, then you can say that your system is Bibo stable, and we don't really need to do much you don't need to say beyond this. So if this is there, then we can say that the system is Bibo stable. Okay. So at this moment, I think a lot of talking. I think we'll take a small break of 5 minutes and I'll come back and then we'll start the class again. In the meantime, probably you can ask some of your friends to join, because there are only about 18 people. Tell them to join, because you're starting a new unit and this is an important unit, probably the most important in the entire course. So just ask people to join it. Is Anmol there? Is the CR? Okay. Is there another CR here?
Sir, you're not audible.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I was just saying that this is the condition for Bibo stability on the impulse response. So you really don't need to know whether your input is bounded, what is the input, what you have to find the output. You just need to look into the impulse response and be able to evaluate this integral and say that, okay, I'm well within my bounds as far as the input and output is concerned. Okay, but since we are talking in terms of frequency response, what Bibo stability means in terms of frequency response, is just simply write it. Just a second. So Bibo stability. So we have studied what Bibo stability means when you have been given an impulse response. But as I said, that if suppose since we're talking about frequency domain analysis, we'll be given transfer functions like GH, GS, and we'll be given feedback transfer functions like HS. So in what sense can we we can say that a system is stable? So basically, the idea is that a system is stable, and when we talk about stable, I mean Peepo stable. A system is stable if all its poles lie on the left side of the S-plane. And so I'm stating this. I would want probably one of you to figure. I would want you people to figure out why this is that it has to be on the left hand side. I'll discuss it probably at some later time. But the question is, I'm saying that the systems are stable if all its poles lie on the left hand side of the S-plane. Now this is a standard thing, and some of them they may, under some conditions, they can also lie on the imaginary axis. Under some conditions, may lie on the imaginary axis as well. So if you have a S-plane, so you have the real axis here and you have the imaginary axis here. Then if all the roots, so this is the S-plane. If all the roots lie in this region, or maybe I should probably use some other color. So this region is the stable region, and this region here this is the unstable as far as the location of poles is concerned. And this axis, this axis, which is a j omega axis, is often called as marginally stable or marginally unstable. Because you're just at the verge. You can call it marginally stable also, you can call it marginally unstable also. So because this is like the boundary. If you go slight left, you're into stability. If you go slight right, you're into instability. So you could call it anything. But this marginally stable and marginally unstable also has a precondition, which we'll probably study in a little while. But this is essentially what it is. So if if all the poles are on the left hand side of the S-plane, then you are okay. You say the system is stable. If all the poles are on the right hand side of the S-plane, then you say that the system is unstable, and the system is marginally stable or it is marginally unstable if under certain conditions the poles lie on the imaginary axis. Now the question is, there are two questions. Number one, roots of what? That means you will ascertain poles of what? That is basically what it is. So we will ascertain, basically we're talking about the poles of the open loop transfer function, which is the poles of GS. So we look into the poles of GS basically. That is what we look into. Essentially that is what we look into. And then another question is, why is it that they have to be on the left hand side of the S-plane? What does that mean? Left hand side of the S-plane means that your sigma should be less than 0, because your S is sigma plus j omega. Your sigma is essentially less than 0. That is basically what left hand side of the S-plane means. I'm getting a call. Just for a moment, we'll take a break and we'll come back. Just a second. Yeah, sorry. So we are looking into the poles of GS. Basically, we have to find out the location of poles of GS. But more importantly, the question is that why is it that the roots have to be on the left hand side of the S-plane? I want you to ponder over this a little bit. Try to figure out. I will obviously give you the answer subsequently, but this is something that I want you people to look into. That why is it that it has to be less than sigma has to be less than 0 for the system to be stable? Anyways, so assuming that it is, for now, assuming that it is, then let's talk. Let's take few examples and let's see if we can figure out the stability and instability of a system. Okay, so suppose I say, let me give you some examples. Okay, let me just think of something. Yeah, so there are some examples. What do you think about the stability of this? Like say that there is a suppose I say that you have a transfer function which is given by this. What can you say about the stability? So you can say that the poles of this lie at -1, -2, and -3. They are all on the left side. So the system is stable. We are not talking in terms of how stable or relative stability. We are talking in terms of absolute stability, that yes, it is stable because all the roots lie on the left hand side of the S-plane. What do you say about this? What do you think about this? I want an answer from you people. Can you tell me what is the stability of this? Let me just ask somebody. महर्षि स्टेबिलिटी बताना था, इसका स्टेबिलिटी बताओ इसका.
The roots left side है.
Not roots, actually you have to look at poles.
Yes sir, poles sir, poles. The poles left side है S plane के.
Yeah, so you have to look at poles. So this is that all the poles are on the left side. You don't worry about the zeros. Zeros are not important when we talk in terms of absolute stability. It's
Yes, sir.
basically the poles. Thank you. So one is at s equal to -1. The other would be, if you solve this, you'll get a complex pairing of roots. So yes, they are on the left. So this is stable. But let's say that, if I would have written something like this, 20 s plus 1 over s minus 1 s plus 1, then this would have been unstable. Because you have one root which lies at s equal to 1. Root as in poles, basically. You have one pole that lies on the left-hand side of, right-hand side of the S-plane. And that is why this is unstable. Let's look into some of the cases where the roots lie on the j omega axis, and then I'll just say a certain thing about stability over there. Let's say that we have a system which is something like this: s plus 2, s square plus 2. If I ask you whether this system is stable or unstable, then you will be able to say this thing. So you have one root which is at s equal to -2, which is basically this. Or I should not say, I should say poles. So you have poles which are s equal to -2, number one. Number two is that you have poles at plus minus j root 2, right? So now if you look at the S plane, so you have one root which is somewhere here, and then you have one over here somewhere 1.732, so someone here, one is here and one is here. And these roots which are imaginary, these are simple roots. So if you have roots on the j omega axis which are simple, and the other roots or the other poles are on the left hand side, then the system is marginally stable, or marginally unstable. So that is what you need to know, is that all poles of 1 plus gs hs equals 0. That means poles, sorry, I should not write poles, I should write poles. Let's not write about poles of what, but let me just say poles must lie on left side of the S plane, and the imaginary that means roots or poles of the type of j omega must be simple. If these two conditions satisfy, then this is marginally unstable. Had this been 10 over s minus 2, s square plus 2, then this would have been of the type that you have s equal to 2 here, and then you have 1 over here and 1 over here. So these roots over here, which are purely imaginary, they are simple roots, all right, and they are on the j omega axis, that's also okay. But you have one root or one pole of this equation which is on the right hand side, and therefore this system is unstable. So the bottom line is that even if you have one pole of a control system on the right hand side of the S-plane, the system is unstable. If you have all the poles which are on the left hand side of the S-plane, and then there are some simple poles on the j omega axis, the system is marginally stable or marginally unstable. And the next possibility is something like this. Suppose you would have had something like this: S plus 2 S square plus 4 whole square. Now, if you look at this, you have one pole at minus 2. So you have one pole here. Then you have, using S square plus 4, you have plus minus j root 2. Sorry, j2. So you have j2. But these are not simple roots, they are double roots. They are double roots because of this square over here, which means that you will have one root here and at the same point, and one root here at the same point. This is unstable. Due to multiple order imaginary roots. So if there are roots on the imaginary axis, j omega axis, they have to be simple root. So there are like two questions that are now I have for you, which you probably.
So what do we mean by multiple order imaginary roots?
Multiple order imaginary roots means that they'll be of so this will give you two roots, which is plus j2 and minus j2, right? But if you have s square plus 4 whole square in the denominator, which means that you will have plus j2 minus j2 minus j2. So these are multiple orders. Are you understanding what I'm saying? If this was 3, then you would have had plus j2 plus j2 plus j2 minus j2 minus j2 minus j2. So they are multiple order poles.
So that means that same value imaginary roots की same value बारी-बारी नहीं आनी चाहिए. That will be multiple.
नहीं आनी चाहिए. That means if you have j2, then it should just be simple in the sense that एक ही बार आए. अगर इसमें कोई भी power n की चढ़ जाएगी, s square plus 4 to the power n, then it will become an unstable system. That is basically it.
Sir, how do we verify this?
I'm sorry?
How do we verify this?
Yeah, so that is that. So I'm going to come to that. So that was what I was saying. There are two questions that you have to now look into based on whatever we have done so far. One is you have to figure out, and it'll be nice if you do. I will eventually tell you, but just do a little bit of pondering. Why is it that roots, first of all, the poles have to be on the left-hand side? Number one. Number two is, why do you think that if you have a multiple order imaginary root on the j omega axis, the system becomes unstable? So these are two questions. I just want you to look. Just go check on Google. You'll definitely find an answer. And let's see whether you understand it or not, and probably come back tomorrow to discuss it. So this is basically two questions I want you people to, just look into. I mean, one is poles on the left side of S-plane. Why? Just try to figure it out. And let me give you a hint also. You will probably need to go a little further than the Bibo stability in terms of impulse response that we have done. You just need to develop it a little more and you'll understand why. Take its Laplace transform and then try to understand why is it. So that is the hint to find out why poles have to be on the left hand side. The second is why multiple order imaginary roots. Render a system unstable. So this is the second question. Just ponder over these two questions. I will give you an answer in tomorrow's class if nobody else can give an answer. But these are interesting questions, and you should. So mathematically, you must be able to give me an answer to this. अभी कुछ करिएगा मत क्योंकि क्लास चल रहा है तो आवाज मत करिएगा. Thank you. Okay, so these are two questions. Just hold on to the explanations from my side. I just want you people to, find an answer, and we'll discuss it in tomorrow's class. And if you can't, then obviously I'll tell. But one thing is for sure that we are looking at poles, and we are looking at the existence of poles on the left-hand side. So the question that comes to our mind, first of all, is how to go about it when you have maybe a closed loop transfer function given to you. So now we have ascertained a couple of things in our discussion so far. Number one is that we are looking at single input, single output LTI systems and ascertaining whether they are stable or they are not stable. Then we are going to be looking into stability from two perspectives. We will either look into absolute stability or we'll look into something called as relative stability. Absolute stability is a simple, crude answer whether a system is stable or a system is not stable. Relative stability is more of a question where we will ascertain whether a system is stable in comparison to another system, or stabler, so to say, if that is a word, or to what extent can we say for sure that the system will remain stable. So those are the kind of questions that relative stability analysis will answer for us. Okay. Then we saw that if the system has to be Bevo stable, then the integration of the magnitude of the impulse response must be bounded. And that translates to the fact that the poles must lie on the left-hand side of the S-plane. And if the poles are on the imaginary axis, then for a system to be marginally stable, the roots or the poles must be simple. If they are multiple order poles, then the system is unstable. And these are the two questions that I want you to look into. And I'm sure that you'll be able to find an answer. I mean, it will be in, some of the answers are going to be in Kuo only, the book that I've asked you. So just go through it, read it a little bit, to see if you can understand it, and then we'll come again and start a class using from these questions. And if somebody can answer, I'll be very happy if somebody gives me an answer rather than me giving an answer. Okay. Anyways, so now let's look at what's the time? Okay, it's 10. I'll just take maybe 10 minutes more and we'll finish the class. So we are looking at the first method which we will use to figure out whether a system is stable or not, and that method is Routh-Hurwitz. Method. The Routh-Hurwitz method gives you absolute stability. And this is a very important thing to remember. With Routh-Hurwitz method, you can tell whether a system is stable or it is not stable. That's all. Yes or no, nothing more. So it is a method that gives you absolute stability. And there are a couple of things it tells you. Of course, it tells you if a system is stable or unstable. Number one, it tells you how many poles lie on the right hand side of the S-plane. What are those poles? Well, you need to find it out. But Ruth Hurwitz tells you essentially these two things. It will tell you that a system is stable or unstable. It will tell you how many poles lie on the right hand side, because roots have to lie on the right hand side for them to be for the system to be unstable. Okay, so let me just insert a couple of more slides. Yeah. Okay, so there are a couple of things that we must understand a little bit about Ruth Hurwitz. So so people are telling me that they have not studied Hurwitz polynomials in network analysis. Well, these kind of polynomial studies are there in network analysis. You study about Hurwitz polynomials. You study about polynomial being semi-positive, positive definitive, so long and so. But those discussions are for network analysis. If you've not studied it, I don't think that this is the class to discuss it. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of idea about Ruth Hurwitz only here. So, but I'll give you a little bit of backup, backstory to it. So it was basically Hurwitz that talked about what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for ascertaining stability of control systems. Initially, so there are two kinds of things that one must have. One is you should have necessary, and then you have sufficient. In terms of conditions, I'm sure that you must have heard the statement that this is necessary but not sufficient, and this is necessary and sufficient to be able to say something about, say, a system or something. Have you heard these words before in your life? Necessary,
Yes, sir.
necessary, sufficient, things like that. Okay, so basically when you talk in terms of polynomials, there are some necessary conditions that must be satisfied for a system to be stable. And those necessary conditions are, number one is, let me just say this first before I talk about necessary and sufficient conditions. So in Ruth Hurwitz, basically, we are looking at the characteristic equation. Which is basically 1 plus GS HS equals 0. Okay. The reason why we are looking at this equation is that we know that the closed loop transfer function is basically 1 plus GS HS, right? So the poles of this transfer function are going to be decided by the equation 1 plus GS HS equal to 0. So and this equation is called as the characteristic equation. That is why we are going to look into the values of S that satisfy this equation, and they will be the roots of the closed loop transfer function. Okay, so if we look at this characteristic equation, we have G into S, G into H plus 1 equals 0. So this in general is going to be something of a polynomial like this: an Sn minus 1 plus an minus 2 Sn minus 2 plus a1s plus a0 equals 0. So this is basically what a general characteristic equation will look like. So then comes the question, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions to ascertain whether the system is stable or not? There are some necessary conditions. One thing is for sure, that you have to check for these necessary conditions before you start the problem. The necessary conditions to ascertain stability. When a characteristic equation is given to you, when a so the number one condition is that all the coefficients must be real and of the same sign. They must be real and of the same sign. It cannot be that the coefficients, some of them are positive and some of them are negative. So that means an minus 1, an minus 2, a1, a0, they all must have the same sign. That's number one. Necessary condition. If you see a polynomial written in which some of the coefficients are imaginary or some of the coefficients are positive and the other are negative, then you can say that, this system is not stable. पहले ही बोल दो. Analysis करने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. Second, none of the coefficients vanish. None of the coefficients vanish. That means that none of these coefficients should be zero. So if you start with, say, let's say that you have a system in which the highest power of S is 6. So then you'll have S6 and there'll be some coefficient associated with it. Then you'll have S5. So basically what I'm trying to say is that suppose you have a polynomial like this, S6 plus A5 S5 plus A4 S4 plus A3 S3 plus A2 S square plus A1 S plus A0 equals 0. If you have something like this, then first of all these coefficients, they have to be real according to the first condition, and they must either all be positive or they must all be negative. They cannot be positive or negative. Number one. Second condition is that you cannot have one of them not being there. That means ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि जो equation बन रही है उसमें ये है ही नहीं. This is the equation. और ये भी नहीं है दूसरा. So that should not be there. You should have all of them there. Now the question will be, sir, why? So the answer to why is there in analysis of polynomials. That will be wasting too much time. So we are just going to look into this thing. But if you want, we can take it up at some other time, maybe tomorrow, maybe some other time when we are not burdened by the task of finishing certain things up to a certain time. But this is something that is there. You can pick up any of the network analysis books and you can see that why this is the necessary condition. So they will tell you there. Anyways, so these are the two necessary conditions. So if you are given a characteristic equation, you will first look into these two things. You will see whether the coefficients are real and are of the same sign, and none of them is vanishing. If these two conditions are not satisfied, any one of them is not satisfied, you don't need to do analysis and you can straight away say that this system is unstable. But these are necessary conditions but not sufficient. That means that even if these two conditions are being satisfied, the system can still be unstable. So they are not sufficient, but they are necessary. So these are the first steps when you study Routh-Hurwitz criteria. You will see these two conditions being satisfied. If they are satisfied, then only you can move ahead. But if you are satisfied that these are not fulfilled, then you can just straight away say that the system is unstable. Okay. So it was basically Hurwitz that gave a condition which was both necessary and sufficient to judge the stability. But this was very very tedious to perform. He said, so very tedious. This method is very tedious. He said that you need to evaluate Hurwitz. So for a nth order characteristic equation, you have to find n Hurwitz determinants and they must all be positive. What are Hurwitz determinants is again not a topic of this discussion, but they are very difficult to evaluate. That is basically what I want to tell you. So obviously this method is necessary and sufficient, but you cannot really work with it. Even writing a computer program is not that simple for this. So then came another researcher or mathematician who was Ruth. And Ruth said that, okay, let's formulate a much easier way. And he proposed what is called as a tabulation method. He proposed a tabulation method which simplified the Hurwitz criteria of ascertaining whether a system is stable or not based on the characteristic equation, which is basically a polynomial equation in S. So that is why combining them together, we say that we have a Routh-Hurwitz method to find absolute stability. And this method is a tabulation method, tabular method. So I'll talk a little bit about this method, but we'll take up some examples in the next class. But I'll just tell you how this table is actually formulated. Let us consider the same polynomial that we were considering. It is A6, S6 plus A5, S5 plus A4, S4 plus A3, S3 plus A2, S2 plus A1S plus A0 equal to 0. So the first thing that you will see if you're given a real polynomial, these are just written symbolically, you will see the coefficients. All these coefficients have to be real and all these coefficients must have the same sign. So they either can be all positive or they can all be negative. They cannot be positive or negative in some permutation or combination. So you check that first. Then second thing that you check is, are all the polynomials there or is any one of them zero? If any one of them is zero, you don't need to do the tabular method. You can straight away say that the function is representing a system which is unstable. But if let's say that these two conditions satisfy, these necessary conditions satisfy, then we formulate a table which is as follows. So we start with S6 and we write S6 here, and then we note down all the coefficients of even powers of S. So you have A6, you have, just a second, you have A4, you have A2, you have A0. Then you write S5 because that's the next highest S order term. And then you mention all the odd power coefficients, A5, A3, A1 and 0. 0 I'm writing because there is nothing there. Okay. So then next you write S4 because we are in this column we are decreasing the order of S here. So then the next would be S3, S2, S1, and S0. So what is S4? S4 is A5 multiplied by A4. A5 multiplied by A4 minus A3 multiplied by A6 divided by A5. And let me call this quantity as capital A. Let me just also create these columns so that things are clear. Then we come to this section. So this is A5 into A2, A5 into A2 minus A1 into A6 divided by A5, and that is B. When we come to this section here, that is A5 into A0 minus 0 into A6 divided by A5, and that is equal to A0 only. And this remains 0. So S4 has values A, B, and A0, and it is 0. Then we come to S3, and we follow the same pattern. This would be A into A3 minus B into A5 divided by A, and let me call this quantity as C. Then we come here. So this would be A into A1 minus minus A0 into A5 divided by A, and let this quantity be D. And then the third would be obviously A into 0 and 0 into A5, so that is 0, and then this is 0. So now S cube has CD00. Now we come to S square. S square is C into B minus D into A divided by C, and that is basically E. Then we have C into A0 minus 0 into A, which is 0, divided by C, which is A0, and this is 0 and this is 0. So now S square has E000, then S to the power 1. That is E into D minus A0 into C divided by E, and let me call this quantity F. Then everything else will be 0. And then S to the power 0 is basically F into A0 divided by F, so you get A0, and this is 0. You can't go any further. So this is how we create a table given a characteristic equation. Now, Routh-Hurwitz criteria says something like this. Just one last slide and we'll end the class. It says that the roots lie on the left hand side of the S plane if there is no sign change in the first column. Which means that all these quantities A6, A5, capital A, capital C, capital E, capital F, and A0, they are all of the same sign. If that is what there is, then you will say that all the roots of the characteristic equation, or let me just say all the poles, lie on the left hand side of the S-plane and the system is stable. The number of, then it says another thing. It says the number of sign changes indicate number of roots on the right side. Of S-plane. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Suppose you would have formulated that table and you would have had S6, S5, S4, S3, S2, S1, S0. And you would have got values like 6, 5, 2.3, 1.3, 5, 7.2, 1.03. Then you see that all these values are positive. So you would have said the system is stable. This is what you would have said. Because all the signs of all the values in the first column, this column here, this column, this column, all these values are of the same sign, so we don't need to worry. But suppose these values would have been, say, 2, 1, -5, 6.43, 2.72, 1, 0. Suppose like this. Now, first of all, the sign in the first column is not the same. You encounter a minus sign here. That means that the system is unstable. That's it. I mean, you can straight away say that the system is unstable. And the system is unstable because there are poles on the right hand side of the S-plane. Then the question comes, how many poles? So you see how many sign changes have happened. So 2 is positive, 1 is positive. Then from 1 to 5, you have one sign change. Then from -5 to 6.43, you have another sign change. And then it is all positive. That means there are 2 sign changes. That means there are 2 poles that have sigma greater than 0. So this is basically how we, move ahead with Routh-Hurwitz's criteria. I would end the class here now, and we'll take up Routh-Hurwitz's criteria tomorrow, and we'll finish it, and then we'll move ahead. So if there is any question, I can pick it up. Otherwise, we'll just break. And there are 2 questions that I want you people to figure out by tomorrow's class. One is that why is it that for stability, the roots must, the poles or the roots of the characteristic equation must lie on the left-hand side of the S-plane. And second is, why is it that purely imaginary roots which are of multiple order result in system becoming unstable? So these are 2 things that I want you people to try to figure out. And I will ask you tomorrow before the class starts. And that's it. Okay, if there are no questions, then we'll leave. All right. Okay, thank you.